back to our 5 levels of consciousness discourse. Today we're going to talk about level 1 in a little bit more depth than we did in our introduction.
And level 1, as I hope you remember, is actions. And actions are your words and your deeds.
Right. And sometimes God will refer to them as works. So works or deeds, he uses them interchangeably in the scriptures, but that's what he's talking about. So what do we need to know about actions? What do we need to talk about?
All right, well, the first thing you always talk about with actions is about how they're under your control. 100% under your control. And this is, I think, a hard concept in some ways because people do not feel in control of themselves all the time. In fact, most of us feel frequently, we feel like the Apostle Paul does in the book of Romans when he says, that which I would do, I do not. And that which and that which I would not, that I do. I might be getting the wording a little bit wrong, but what he says is, in a paraphrase, he's like, the things I want to do, I don't do those things. And the things I wish I wouldn't, I do them.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel like having your actions under control. And yet that is a universal human experience. To want to do things you don't do, and to not want to do things that you do.
And so the thing about actions in this, there's so many reasons that this is important, but one is, and this is something else that people don't like, but it's also true. God judges us by our actions. He does not judge our thoughts. He does not judge our feelings. He doesn't judge our context. Now, he wants us to change our thoughts and feelings and context. He wants them to become more like him at all those levels, but he judges us based on our actions.
The Sermon on the Mount, I feel like certainly sounds like we're being judged by the thoughts and the intents of our heart.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying in your interpretation of that is that is only true because our thoughts and our feelings create our actions, or that you could use the scriptural phrase that says, by their fruits ye shall know them, which is also Jesus Christ. The fruits are the actions.
Right,
and he's saying that by our actions we can know
what's inside,
what the thoughts and intents of our hearts are.
Right.
And so those things are judged only in as far as they create actions that are judged. So
for example, to me the best example of this is and I was just reading another example just recently, but I'm going to give you the example that really clarified this for me. And that was when Alma and Amulek are in the city of Ammonihah. And the city has cast all the men out, and they've taken all the women and children, all the Christian men, and they've taken all the Christian women and children. And they're burning all the books, and they're throwing the women and the children in the fire and burning the women and children. And Amulek looks at Alma and he says, you have the power to stop this. Why won't you stop this? And Alma says, I am constrained by the Spirit. And he goes on to explain that God needs to allow these men to act so that he can judge them appropriately.
God doesn't act the way that they act in Minority Report, where they're like, we're going to execute people for crimes that they intend to commit, or thought crimes,
or that they might commit based on their thoughts. Yeah. He judges us based on what we do, and he allows us to do it. And that's what we call agency, right? Within the church or outside of the church, most people call it free will, but it's a gift that God has given us that he says, you get to choose. You get to choose what you do, and I will judge you based on those actions.
I really like the word agency as opposed to will, although will is a great word too. But agency comes from a Latin root that is the root of the word action. Ago, agere, I do, I act, I drive. All of the it's the generic source word for the idea of action.
Right. And so we are agents unto ourselves. We're given that power. We know that. God has told us that. That's why we know we have control of our actions. And no matter what you think, you might say, I'm compelled by this by somebody or something to do this.
And
no,
we
you're
often
not.
say, you made me, he made me, the devil made me do it.
Mm-hmm.
Any of those things.
But none of
all
those,
of those are a lie.
Right. Nobody can compel you to do anything. And God won't compel you to do anything. And so all of our actions are entirely ours, and we have to own them. You cannot push your actions onto anybody else.
And why does it matter so much to know that we have control of our actions?
Well, to me, the most important reason is because we can then use our actions as tools to change unwanted thoughts, feelings, contexts, and even unconscious behaviors.
Yeah, this is the most powerful part of the levels of consciousness, in my opinion. And you get it right here at the beginning. The idea that controlling our actions controls everything deeper about us.
And really, when you think about it this way, what I really want you to think about is there's two words that we talk about within the gospel of Jesus Christ that I think oftentimes we don't understand appropriately. And one of them is consecration. We consecrate ourselves to God. And what that means is we do the things he asks us to do. That's really what it means. We consecrate ourselves to God by doing what he's asked us to do. And then his part of that promise is to sanctify us. And so when we consecrate our actions, which is where we have agency, when we consecrate our actions to God, he sanctifies or changes the inner parts of us, those inner levels of consciousness.
What I love about those two word choices you just used is that consecrate means to set apart for a sacred purpose. And sanctify means to make holy or sacred. And so what you're saying is that our part is to set our own will aside for the purposes of God. Mm-hmm. Or say, I'm going to put my own desires, my own plans for my life, I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to give my life as something that's going to be for your purposes, for your will, for your design. And then God comes in and makes that thing which is us and our will and our plans for our life, makes them into a holy, sacred thing that accomplish his work.
And a totally new thing. We become different. We become different in all levels of our consciousness. And really the very best example of this, always the best example is Jesus Christ. But the best example of this in Jesus' life is when he's kneeling in the Garden of Gethsemane, just preparing himself for the atonement, for his atoning sacrifice. And he says, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. His will, Jesus doesn't, he makes it clear. I don't want to have to do this. This is going to be hard, and I don't want to do it. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And that's not exactly what he says.
Pretty close.
But it's close to that. But he's saying, my actions, what I do, I am doing for you, Heavenly Father.
He's consecrating the remainder of his life, which is about to end, and his eternal being.
And he's
to the will of God.
Consecrating all of that to God the Father. And he then is able to be fully sanctified through his sacrifice and his resurrection. He is able to be fully sanctified, and then through his consecration and sanctification, he then is able to sanctify all of us as we consecrate our lives to him.
What I like about what you're saying now is that when we talk about being in control of our actions, it's tempting to think we're having this vision of life where it's like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You can make yourself exactly what you want to be. You can carve out the person you want. And like it's kind of a super productivity, motivational speakery kind of thing. You're in 100% control. But what you're saying is that the control is only useful in as far as you give your will over to God to bring those two things into alignment.
Right. So God has given us agency, so we get to choose what we do. But he's asked us to only do the things he wants us to do. Is that kind of an interesting thing? He says, I'm going to give you your agency. You can do whatever you want. But please, do the things I'm asking you to do. And he asks us to do that because he knows the only way we can be sanctified is by consecrating our actions to him.
So on a daily basis, on a granular, minute, what you're doing right now basis, how does this look for your clients when you're trying to get them to recognize that they're in control of their actions and to use their actions productively?
Well, I think the most a couple of things. Number one is we talk again about how our actions are shared. So
Okay. Yeah,
people are going to judge you based on what they see, and don't get me wrong. The scriptures say, "Thou shalt not judge," but they also say, "By their fruits ye shall know them." So God doesn't want us to judge in terms of condemnation. We don't have a right to determine where somebody is going to end up eternally.
So anytime somebody says, you think I'm going to hell, if that is a true thought on your part, you're wrong to be thinking that.
Right. You should never be judging anybody in terms of their eternal destiny. However, you not only should, but you have to judge people based on their actions and to determine, for example, who am I going to hang out with? Who do I want to be around me on a regular basis? Well, I'm going to look for people who share my values, but I can tell based on their actions.
We also have to judge people's intentions, as we have to create our perceptions of who they are, what they think and feel as much as possible from the actions that we see them do. Our ability to construct any real version of another person is based on our ability to make judgments from their actions.
Right. And so
if you were to walk up to me and slap me in the face, I would start making some judgments about you based on that. There's a wide range of judgments I could make, but my mind would automatically be starting to try to figure out what was going on that caused you to do that.
Right. So a good example of that is your cousin Sarah.
That's probably why I thought about face slapping, but I'm not sure that it's polite to bring up specific people.
Well, it's probably
in an
not.
example.
But it also makes me think of in the book Cheaper by the Dozen.
Okay.
When the father of this large family, they're on the beach vacationing, and a woman is bending over, and he has some kind of a stick in his hand, and he spanks her on the butt. And then he's just horrified.
Because he didn't really mean to, in a sense, like he just...
It's
like that feeling that you have when someone's bent over and you're just like, look, you just look so kickable.
Right, and so he still made that decision. He still did choose to do that, but then she's going to make a judgment based on that, which probably is not going to be real accurate to his overall personality.
No.
But for her, that's the only action she has to judge him by, right?
That's so unfortunate.
And so one of the things that we work with clients is you have to know That's how people are going to judge you. So you have to choose your actions accordingly. How do you want to be seen by the people around you? How do you want to be known and recognized? And that's one of the things you have to recognize. Okay, what am I choosing to do, and how is that affecting the people around me and their judgment of me?
Okay. What else, when you're talking to people about their actions, you talk about how they're going to affect the deeper levels, and we'll talk about that more as we talk about the deeper levels of consciousness.
Well, the important thing, the other important thing about your actions is that they, again, like we said earlier, they are the tool for change, because this is the way that you can consecrate yourself to the Lord by giving. He gave you your agency. Now you give Him your will, and so that you're doing what He wants you to do. You're consecrating yourself. Now, that's going to help you to change thoughts, feelings, context, and unconscious. And like you said, we'll talk about that, because that's going to be a major component of each of those, is recognizing that actions are what we have. That's what God has given us as a tool to make ourselves better. And I think of it in terms of, there's an old phrase from Shakespeare, from the Hamlet, where he says, "To be or not to be, that is the question." And then I think it was Marion G. Romney, but it might have been Elder Tan. What's his name?
And Eldon Tanner.
Thank you, that person, who changed it, and I love the way they changed it, because they said the question is not to be or not to be, it is to become or not to become. Yeah. And I think it's so profound that we can use our actions to become the men and women that God has intended us to be.
Yeah. So, most of us don't have as much control over our 100% controllable actions as we would like. Most of us have some areas, at least, where we feel weak-willed, where our alarm goes off in the morning and we feel unable to make ourselves get out of bed, or where we are.
No, but just think about the way you said that, because it's very fascinating, because it's true. What you said is exactly true.
I think I did that accidentally.
You said, we wake up, our alarm goes off at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we don't feel like getting out of bed. That's true. And you don't have control of that. But whether you stay in bed or not is entirely up to you. You can feel like staying in bed, but still get out of bed.
Okay, but where I'm going with this is, what do we do to help ourselves exercise more control over our controllable actions? Because at this point, we're acknowledging, okay, right? We're saying our actions are 100% controllable, and yet we do not control them as well as we would like to.
Except for that, we do.
Okay.
Because you controlled your body, and you told your body, you stay right here in bed. That was a control mechanism that you had to keep your body in bed. If you didn't have control, and you knew that you were supposed to get up at 5 o'clock, you would have just automatically gotten up at 5 o'clock.
Okay, so what you're saying is 100% of the time we are in control of our actions. Whatever we're doing, it's the thing we chose to do. What I'm saying is, let's talk about the tool of how we exercise the control, more of the control that we want to, that we do more of the things that we want to do,
right,
and fewer of the things that we want to not do.
So you're saying, how do we consecrate our control to God?
Sure. That's what I'm saying.
And the answer is the levels of motivation. which
Okay,
is
but
another tool, another class to do at another point. So here's the thing.
Okay, but at
Honestly,
this stage of knowledge,
it's just what President, or at the time President Uchtdorf, but now Elder Uchtdorf, said in his talk about anger. And he said, if you're angry and you want to throw something, just stop. And that's it. I wish that I wish there was something else you could say, but you're in control. Just do it. And I can't give you anything else, because that is the tool. If you feel like I should get up at 5 o'clock, just get up at 5 o'clock. And now you can add some actions to it to make it easier. So, for example, when I have a client, and I do this a lot with people for waking up, if you want to get up at 5 o'clock, your alarm goes off. What are the actions that you can take that will get you up? So usually what I tell them is, take your blanket and physically throw it off of the bed so that you have nothing to cover up with. Then stand up and say out loud, I like life. Now that comes from a movie, a quote from a movie that I really love, but it's something that if you're putting these actions together, so you're not only getting out of bed, because that's not enough. You're throwing the blanket off, you're standing up, and you're saying something.
so I think the key to what you're saying right now is that these actions that you're tying to getting out of bed in the morning, that you have chosen what actions you're going to take ahead of time. Nobody spontaneously wakes up, feels tired, and doesn't want to get out of bed, and then just has the spontaneous action of throwing their covers off and getting up and declaring that they like life. If your clients do that, it's because you told them to do it, and they chose before that morning, maybe the night before when they were going to bed, they thought, okay, they said to themselves, Seth told me to do this, and tomorrow morning I'm going to do it. When my alarm goes off, I'm going to throw my blankets off.
And you know what's interesting about that? When you put it that way, I think that's very fascinating, because it's a mirror of consecration.
Yeah.
Because God says, I want you to do this, and I do it because God said to do it, not because I want to do it. Sometimes I do. Sometimes my will and his will align really well. Sometimes they don't. And I think, I don't want to do this, but you told me to, so I'm going to. And in this case, what I'm doing with my clients is we're mirroring the principle of consecration.
And
I'm giving them a task to do, and they're doing it not because they want to. They're doing it because I asked them to.
yes, and in this case, in this scenario, the person's doing what you told them to do.
Right.
The scenario would work just as well if it's something the person told themselves to do.
Correct.
If you said to yourself, okay, I want to get up tomorrow morning. It's hard for me to get up. What makes it hard? Oh, I'm nice and cozy in my bed. Okay, I'm going to make myself less cozy. And what else makes it hard? I just have a negative attitude. I'm going to make a positive affirmation statement right afterwards. And so the fact that you said it to somebody versus somebody coming up with the idea on their own and thinking it and deciding it, that's not the key difference. The key difference is the decision ahead of time of what the action is going to be.
Right.
Sets you up to implement the action in the moment.
So you have to. Here's the other thing that you have to consider, because I think we're the action of getting out of bed, right, is different from the context of I should get out of bed.
Yes.
So I think a lot of times what we're talking about are these two different things. It's like, well, how do I get myself to get out of bed at 5 o'clock if I think I should get out of bed? Well, thinking you should get out of bed is not an action. There's a thought there may be a feeling, and there's definitely a context. But the action is getting out of bed. That is the action. Or staying in bed. It's one of the two. You're either staying in bed or you're getting out of bed. And so So I guess the thing to me is when we say you control your actions, what I'm saying is whatever you do, you chose to do it, whichever option you take. Whether it's the option that you felt like you should or not, doesn't matter. You are accountable for the action that you took. And so if I say throw your blanket off of you, but you decide not to, you still have made the choice not to throw your blanket off. If you choose to, then you do. So that's the thing is, actions are things that you're doing, not things that you think you should do,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about using, again, we're talking about how do I use my actions to overcome a feeling? How do I use my actions to overcome a context? And we'll get into those things, but really your actions are your actions. It's
Okay.
what you do, that's your action.
So what I'm getting from you right now is that the important point at this stage of the lesson is just to recognize that your actions are your choice and that you control your choices and nobody else does, and that you're judged by your choices, and that working on trying to make better choices right now until you're understanding the lower levels is not really where we're at right now.
Right, exactly. And think about this too. You judge yourself based on your actions, not just other people. Not just other people are judging you. And that's going to be really important as you try to build self-worth within yourself.
All right, let's get a homework assignment, an actions homework assignment.
That's a good question. What do you think is a good homework assignment for actions?
Well, I was obviously trying to go towards let's use our actions to make better choices, but I feel like you're not quite there yet in the level of classes. So it seems like you're wanting people to just increase their awareness of what their actions are.
Exactly. That's
So
what
in
we
order
need.
to increase their awareness of their actions, what should they do from this class to the next class period?
So the thing that comes to my mind is a song. Is there a song that represents your actions up to this point in your life?
So this is an assignment Seth gives a lot, which is basically pick a theme song. And what you're saying is that your theme song represents the actions that are going on in your life right now.
Pick a theme song based on your personal actions, what you've been doing up to this point in your life. Find a song that
Does it
kind
have to
of
be up to your
speaks
this
about
point in
that.
your life, or just like at this stage in your life?
At this stage, up to this point, I don't care. So long as it's a song that represents how you act, what you do.
Okay. An action-based theme song is your assignment for this week's class, and we will see you next time to talk about the second level of consciousness.